Welcome back. We are at the last keynote of the day, which, lucky or not, is me. So I'm happy to be able to spend some time with you as we close out today. It's always an enviable task to be in between you and drinks. So for the next 2 hours, okay, we won't do that. So, who's had a great day so far today? Good stuff? Absolutely. So before I start my content, I will say this. This is a great time again to network, to learn, etc. Be thinking about what you got out of today for tomorrow, because in the opening tomorrow, we're going to talk. We want to share with each other some of the big takeaways that we've gotten from day one from that perspective. Now, we've had some great dialogue today, and but I got to ask this group. It's a pretty big group here. So how many of you, with a raise of hands, have ever climbed Mount Everest? Nobody? Nobody's climbed Mount Everest? It's a tough ride. I venture to say that customer experience and the service we provide is equivalent to climbing Mount Everest. It's hard work. And it's hard work for a lot of different reasons. One, it is human work and it is system work at the same time. And we've talked already today about both the human side and the need for people to engage at the right level. We talked about leadership and the need there. We just talked about how this is so important as our consumers are people too. But it's system work. It takes a lot to do. And the framework we're going to walk through over the next little bit of time is we're going to walk through a framework to really understand how to use what's going on right now and use it for your business in a structured way. Because I was talking to someone earlier today, the solution providers next door, some of you in the room, excellent. Great products, better products today than we've ever had because of AI and the capabilities that brings. Problem is most providers do like one sliver of what it really takes. It takes all of these things that we're doing working in concert together. And we've got to understand that stitching together of this human and technology work, that's on us. We've got to figure out how to do that. In fact, I talk about it more in the operating system perspective, not just system, but operating system, how our business operates. Because it is that operating system, it's how signals become shared interpretation, and shared interpretation become the decisions we make and the execution we have on behalf of our customers. I have never talked to a C-suite leader of an organization who didn't think being customer-centric is a good idea. I've talked to a ton of C-suite leaders that say, but I don't know how to do it, and that's all nice and good. I don't know what that means to my bottom line and to my shareholders. Because that's fundamentally where these things come together. We have to be thinking about it as an operating system. Now, I'm going to cover some content today, some of the research my organization has done, and hopefully some of this is insightful. We're going to talk a little bit about how we go this. But, when most leaders look at their organization, they look and they see it's pretty, it's good. People are busy, work is getting done. It's it's an area and what I'm looking at looks really good from a distance, right? But something's happening. Something is causing some signals and some warning signs to be out there. The idea that, things are getting a little busier, or dashboards are getting louder, and decisions, that we once had and made are a little bit questionable now because things are changing so fast. It's almost like something is starting to shift in the organization. And in fact, you can hear the crack. You know that there's something going on. I think it was Sarah earlier today that talked a little bit about this. everything is moving under our feet. What we knew, the route we used to know is not there. Who's heard of this little thing called AI? Sarah talked about it. AI is putting stress on the organization in ways that the organization is not prepared to keep up with. Because AI is changing the terrain under our feet, literally. Time is compressed. We used to measure change in organizations at the decade level. Once a decade, a few times a decade, maybe 3 times a decade. Then in about the 2010s, it started to be more a year, every year. Maybe even got to a point now where we're in the 20-teens that it's like 2 to 3 times a year. I don't know who they are, but they are estimating that by 2027, as early as 2027, things can change in how we do business monthly. Think about that. How you're engaging your organization and your customers could change up to monthly. Anybody scared by that? Terrifies me. Because how long do business transformation projects take? So, quick show of hands. How many of you are going through a business transformation project at some level right now? Okay, good number. Not everybody. We did a poll at a recent conference on that exact question. 97% said they're going through some major transformation in their organization. I was shocked. It was not 100%. Because even the small changes are transformations at today's day and age. And that speed that we talked about of change is hard to keep up with. Because if we have this traditional sense of we're going to transform over a period of time, by the time you're halfway through this transformation, again, the ground has shifted. It's changed. You've got to be adaptable to that. We talked about experimentation in the first panel of today. That's where we're going to have to live. We're going to have to be ready to be agile in the both physical sense and even in the IT sense, right? Of understanding how things are going to adapt, how we have to keep up with this. Because these are the changes that we're facing. Everything we knew and know is potentially changing at that rate of speed that we talked about. Now, what AI has done, we talked about it, it's highlighting the fractures. It's highlighting the weak layers in your organization. Anybody who ran out there and did a chatbot early on, what showed up the fastest to the chatbot? The broken processes, the bad content, right? Or the hallucinations because there was no content. I was literally doing a session here in Canada the week that the announcement came out about Air Canada, where the AI made it. You remember that the death benefit issue that came out? It made it up. Oh, it made up some rule, and a huge issue for them. Bad press. And what's funnier, that Air Canada was just down the hall doing a conference. I wanted to jump out and go over there and say, hey guys, this is what you need to focus on. It fractioned decision flow. It ends up creating the kind of challenges that we can't keep up with because everything seems to reset. And what you require in this context is that operating system that allows you structure even when the ground is shifting and when things are changing. So again, that's what I want to talk to you about today. But first, I want to ask you this question. Grab your phone, scan the QR code. I want to hear from you. What are you seeing in your organization that shows you some of the fractures that are coming up for you specifically? And this may be very different from everybody. You can't agree on what the signals actually mean. We talked a little bit about that earlier today. How do you differentiate a signal from noise? Priorities shift faster than the work can land. Execution drifts across functions, silos. Huge challenge there. Tools and data exist, but the system is missing. We're strong locally, departmentally, geographically, but we struggle bringing it all together. Execution drifts across function. Big chunk, 45, 41%. Here's the important thing. They're all showing up. And if this wasn't single choice, many of you probably could have gone all of the above, right? In that context. So if this is what we're experiencing, if this is what we're dealing with, what do we do about it? Let's talk a little bit more about that. So CX maturity, in my organization, and we do a lot of maturity assessments. Many of you probably have gone through maturity assessments, but really understanding what is the maturity of the organization. And I like to look at these 6 camps. It's strategy, it's listening, it's analysis, action, it's monitoring, and culture. These are different components, key components of CX maturity. And some organizations are great at some, bad at others. Some are really bad at all of them. A lot of companies I work with from a consulting standpoint, they were like a 1 across the board on everything. Surprisingly, still today. So with your fingers, I want you to raise your hands. I want you to think about it. If your organization's maturity was on a 10-point scale, so you are absolutely the most mature organization in the world, put up both hands. If you are above average, give me those numbers. If you're single-handed, tell me where you are there. So real quick, everybody think about, on a 10-point scale, how mature is my organization? Put your fingers up. Both hands, one hand. If you're really, really good, take your shoes and socks off and put one of your feet up. No feet, so nobody's there. I got a lot of one-handers. There's a 7, there's a 6, a lot of feet. Nobody's flipping me off, so nobody's a 1 like that. Well, that's good to know. Our research shows that right now we are sitting at roughly, overall, 56.7. If I average out what all the fingers I saw up, probably ends up being about like that, right? So here's the reality. We still have a lot of opportunity to grow. And how many conferences have all of you been to about CX over the years? A lot. We have a lot of room to grow. AI has been that thing that is causing the fractures to become real. But AI is also part of it that can make this achievable for everybody, every organization. Now, I'm going to go back to this climb analogy because in the framework that I use with organizations, it's a 6-camp system. And if you're going to take on like Everest, you jump in and you go through a camp progression. You don't just start at the bottom, climb to the top, and climb back down. It's not how it works. You've got to go through this. There's a couple of things about that climb, too. You don't just go camp 1, or base camp, camp 1, camp 2, camp 3, etc. You don't just go in that order either. You get acclimated. Organizations are always bouncing around just like you would in Everest from base camp to camp 1, back to base camp to camp 1 to camp 2, back to camp 1, maybe back to base camp. You're moving all the time at those levels. And what I like to say is the traditional capability of CX, both from a measurement and an analytics perspective especially, is really around those lower camps. Things like listening, mapping, things of that nature. Well, I want to walk you through these camps as well. So let's start with the first one. Base camp is about culture and leadership. And this goes into not just, when you think about culture in this context, culture is not just the poster with a cat hanging with this cool little phrase underneath it in the conference rooms, right? Culture is not just soft. Culture is actually what gets represented to your organization when leaders either hold or change decisions on the fly. Consistency is a key contributor to the culture that gets directed. So it is so close to leadership discipline. And yet, based on our research, only 25% of people understand their role to CX. I was sitting down with a B2B company, and I was interviewing someone who was responsible for supply chain. And he said, yeah, we have nothing to do with CX. I'm like, your supply chain, you got parts, you got shipments. You're like, what do you mean? His mind, he didn't talk to the customer, right? But fundamentally, he also didn't really understand the concept. So you've got to understand that everybody's got to have that role. But there's a saying, CX is everyone's responsibility, but there's a saying that says, when it's everyone's responsibility, it's really no one's responsibility. That's a part of the problem. Going back to the very beginning of the day, why CX, especially on the noun perspective, is in trouble is because people misunderstand what CX is and can be from that perspective. 47% and then 45% about cascading or reporting challenges down through the organization. This is real. This is about communication. So when you think about base camp, you think about starting to get your organization acclimated, you've got to have those conversations. You've got to bring people together. You've got to have, I do a lot of keynotes for corporate events to kind of get people thinking in the same way because you've got to start doing that, but it's more important to make sure that the leaders are aligned. I was talking to another company that I work with that said, what they were seeing was a 1% difference at the C-suite level on perception. Guess what happens to a 1% difference at the C level when it cascades through the organization? It's a massive chasm. It just gets further and further apart through that process. So understanding that this is where we have to start. We have to win. We have to think about it in a way where culture and leadership is the key starting point for all of us. Now, many of us do that, right? We do training. We have, we do have a lot of conversation about we're being customer-centric, et cetera, but you've got to put more force and function to that. Make it real. Reinforce those activities. Reinforce the rewards of great experiences and ultimately talk about the failures. But going back to when we talked earlier today about experimentation, know that those failures are lessons learned towards a better future. Make those changes part of the DNA of your organization and that understanding. Camp number 2 is intelligent listening. Listening is a system. It's not a channel. It's not a product. It's honestly not even really a noun. But again, when you look at it, this is gaping for us. 70% of companies use surveys, right? That's not a surprise. I mean, I think the 30% that don't is a little bit of a surprise, but if you think about a lot of companies out there, there are some that just don't do anything or they're too small. There's a lot of those that shift that. But when we get down to that level, only 25% actually capture digital behavior to understand their experience. That's surprising in a digital age, right? What's even more surprising, 15% systemically use call transcripts to understand experience. Now, that's different number if you look at using call transcripts to study an agent's performance. Completely different, right? You got to understand that opportunities. That's why it's so low when you think about it really for using transcripts for CX perspective is because most organizations, it's stuck in the contact center and that's all they use it for is coaching an agent. Or if someone has a complaint, they can look up the call and understand it. Now, I'm a Jeep guy. Are there any other Jeep people here? People that love Jeeps? A couple. I got a really nice Jeep Gladiator. Kind of things I want to do to that Jeep Gladiator. Ooh, sorry, that sounded a little dirty. I didn't mean it that way. So I took it in for its first oil change and tire rotation. Walk in, I scheduled online, easy enough. Got reminders, easy enough. Show up, great, handed the keys. Sitting there thinking 30 minutes, I got a meeting I got to be on, and there's no car. About 35 minutes, 40 minutes, I finally go find the technician. Hey, what's going on? Where's my Jeep? It should be done by now. Well, we have one of our bays is down for maintenance, and so everything's kind of backed up. All right, fine. Hour later, miss my meeting. They come and he delivers my keys. As we're walking to the car, he said, hey, just so you know, or first off he said, hey, is there anything we could do to make, to make this experience better for you? Could have done it on time, right? As he's handing my key, he says, tomorrow you're going to get a survey. If there's anything we can do to get all 10s, let us know. Sure enough, the next day, almost like the 24-hour mark, I got an email with the survey. At the same time, I got a text from that technician saying, hey, you probably just got the survey. Remember, if there's anything we can do to get all 10s, let us know. Now he's begging. I didn't take the survey because, I didn't want to rate him bad. It wasn't really his fault, but the experience was horrible, from that perspective. Missed my meeting. The next day, the department manager of the service department sends me an email. Hey, Sean, if you take the survey and give us all 10s, I'll give you a free tank of gas and cover your next 2 oil changes. Now it's bribery. So when we think about listening, what are we listening to? In today's age, I said earlier that AI is finding the fractures. AI is also finding the solution. That's where being able to listen to calls at scales and study them. AI interviewers are the newest component of that, where an AI can talk to your customers in an interview format and grab great feedback and context in that way. Think of a chat bot, but asking questions about the customer's experience. Incredibly deep, but at scale. So there's a lot of solutions now from a listening standpoint that are getting us to that. We were talking earlier today with someone who said, how do I make sure that I understand? Because people are stopping taking our surveys. How do I get the feedback? Well, it's like, are you talking to your customers? Yes. Are you asking them about their experience? That's the opportunity. Think of it that way. The metrics are different. You're not necessarily looking at a lot of scale questions, but you're asking a lot of yes-nos. You take the experience overall and you understand those moments of truth and you say, did we do this? Did we do that? Yes, no, yes, no. Study that then in context of the call transcripts, et cetera. Now you've got this rich data with a structured purpose, which is one of the bigger gaps. The next camp, journey mapping, journey management. You've got to know where you're going, right, in this context. Listening is great. A lot of us listen. Journey mapping has kind of fallen by the wayside over the last couple of years. It was really big about a decade ago. It's not as big anymore. Who has active and recent journey maps in their organization? All right, not very many. We find this is the biggest opportunity we have in partnering with companies is to help them do journey mapping right. Because there's a right way to do it and there's a wrong way to do it. Journey mapping, though, that gives you the context. If you want to understand how to make the ROI real, you map the journey so that you can study it the right way. Because guess what? All that listening you do creates noise. You put it within the context of the journey, now it's a signal. Working with a company, they had this major issue call type that would come in, and it was carrying the water on their NPS. They knew it from their research and their studying. They were able to, only after journey mapping, to realize that they had an 80% reduction in handle time of those situations, high call driver, by the way, because they realized certain things within that journey could be fixed. They fixed them, and they were able to do that. Now you calculate that out, 80% reduction in handle time over this percentage of contact rate, now you've got real ROI. Journeys give you the context to build on. But again, we got 34% really track real-time journey performance, right? That's one of the challenges. 37% really even understand their customer in a single view to attach to a journey, if that's the capability to do so. There are gaps when we're thinking about this opportunity as well, and it's the area that probably over anything else is what I say start here, even before listening, because it gives you that context to understand, and then it gives you the context to understand the ROI, the return on the investment of efforts that you're working on. Customer health. This is the next piece. This is the next camp up the mountain. Customer health represents so if you think about listening, you're usually dealing with experiential data on listening, right? You're trying to understand it from an experience perspective, maybe even emotional, right, from that perspective. When you get to this point of customer health, now this is your operational and your behavioral data. But still, not everybody connects their content. One of the panelists earlier today said that, you have an ERP over here, you have 2 CRMs over there. They were talking about the disconnection between this. Well, the reality is that's where the data, that supply chain person that I was talking to, we were then able to look at this and say, let's look at how your SAP content from a supply chain perspective is implemented and or impacting the journey and therefore impacting the loyalty of your customers. And it was a huge contributor. But 63% use performance dashboards pretty much only. We like dashboards. We're pretty good at creating dashboards. Graphs, word clouds maybe even, some cool stuff like that. 60% have a data warehouse. Data warehouses and data lakes, that was the sneaky thing back about 10 to 15 years ago that was going to solve everything. But you realize you throw all that data in a data lake or a data warehouse without thinking through how to structure it, it's just a bottomless hole of data. It's just dark. You can't figure things out from that perspective. So while there's that, because if you're really looking at CX data and the opportunity to understand it, integrate it with your other systems, your CRM, your ERP. Bring those pieces together. But data structure is so important at this level when we're thinking through this opportunity. Then there's developing the experience engine. How many of you have heard about real-time interaction management? The term's been around for a while. It used to be real-time interaction management was focused mainly on the digital space, looking for real-time triggers on the website and doing pop-ups and redistribution of content as it's happening. It also was used early on as more of a marketing perspective. This is where we're going. This is what our customers are expecting to a certain extent as well. I was sitting down with my aunts and uncles, which you would guess from my gray hair, they're a little bit older. And we were talking about, and one of them said, if I'm sitting talking about product X and then it pops up all over my phone over the next day or two, why can't, if I'm complaining about my bank, I get a pop-up that says, sounds like you're having issues with your bank. Can we help you? Right? So yes, there's privacy issues, things like that, but we got to be thinking about this and say, that's the expectation we have. Because you can do mapping and turn it into management where you're looking at customer health and listening posts at the journey context, but it's all got to have an end purpose, and that end purpose is this real-time engine. Because now, not only are you understanding what's happening in the experiences as they're happening and learning from them, you can interrupt them. And that's a lot of what Sarah and the team talked about from WebEx. Cisco WebEx, right? Systems now that can be looking at these things that are going on with your customers in real time and interrupting that flow and moving them to a positive solution. That should be all of our goals and objectives in today's environment. And the capabilities now are getting there. We have the ability to do this with the right progressive structure within our organization. Now, most companies, to get to this point, it takes multi-years to build it. Most of the companies that are doing it are building it in-house. They've got their great engineers and do that. The challenge a lot of times with that is who's going to run it after they build it, because they're usually off running other things as well. Again, this is a big part of where we're going, because you want to bring the context of the journey across listening, across health, understanding the components. You want to be able to look at, even to a certain extent, decision and leadership intelligence to understand what decisions were made based on this data, and making sure, going back to that avalanche, making sure they hold, going back to the culture, making sure they hold when things change, that you've done the right level of understanding. This sounds crazy, I know, but it's possible today. The last camp is really the governance. This is the rope line. When you start getting towards the summit, it becomes more important than ever you're hooked in. So if you built an environment like this from a listening and health and journey mapping and management, and you're looking at even to an RTIM in that context, you've got to make sure you're governing this as well. Because what happens when leaders change? Right? What happens when Technology, what happens when monthly something is going to potentially impact how you do business? You've got to have that through line. You've got to have that governance. You've got to be able to hook in. And when we think about that CX maturity, that 56.7 that we're collectively sitting at, 87% of the maturity variance is determined by strategy, monitoring, and culture. No tech, right? No listening, none of that. Not even action. This is why it's so important. That leadership, that 1% difference at the C-suite, which becomes a chasm below in the organization, it's important to understand this governance is what drives the adherence to that, and it circles right back around to base camp. It's what reinforces the culture. Now, we walk a lot of organizations through this because the end result we want to get to, last piece here. This is what it's a leadership thing, but how many CX teams feel like they get a little bit of the blame when things don't work? I know that's happening. I actually had a call with a CX practitioner the other day, and she said, one of the hardest things I have right now is that the C-suite is going to ChatGPT to ask about CX instead of coming to my team. Oops. But that's part of that realization that we're looking at from that perspective. So it's all about getting to the summit. But here's the reality. We're like Sherpas. We got to go up and down all the time. We go to the summit, we go back down. We're moving constantly because our customers are moving across our organization at the same level. So we always have to be driving to this solution with purpose and direction and focusing on the right things, because it can get pretty complicated, get pretty hard. Now, the good news is we're learning about a lot of these, and I have already talked about many of them today. We're going to talk about more even tomorrow. Was there anything like crazy brand new in what I shared? Not really. And in fact, CX is one of those weird things that your past is your future. Things we used to do are still, actually in many cases, more relevant today than they were. Just because journey mapping was a fad earlier doesn't mean we don't come back to it now, right? This is where that opportunity has for us. But we have to understand that we have this opportunity because it is about getting ready and not constantly recovering from those fractures, from the avalanche that may be impacting our organization. QR code here is, I have access to a free ebook that goes through the climb, a lot more detail than I covered today. Feel free to download a copy of that. Obviously, this is an area I am super passionate about. I'd love to talk, even, send me a note on LinkedIn, let's connect, let's chat. Happy to share and talk through some of this. I was working with another company recently and an organization, and I got a text message saying, hey, actually I got a text message and an email at the same time that said, hey, this is about to happen to you. Did you know it was coming? And I didn't. I responded via the text message to say, I want to learn more. The system knew that I responded to the text and not the email, so it continued to send me more text messages. It learned. It knew that interaction method was my preference. Sent me a link, said, hey, take a look here. These are FAQs about the situation you're about to deal with. Why don't you take a look? All right, I pulled it up. I looked at the FAQs. My question wasn't answered. Now, I'm a little old school. I could have gone back and forth, but I picked up the phone and I called. They recognized me. They knew my phone number, so they immediately transacted or identified my Annie, if you will, and were saying, hey, I see this is about to go on. Is that what you're calling? You calling about this thing on your account? Oh, yeah. No IVR tree, no representative. None of that, right? They routed me directly to the department. Pops up, person says, hey, I see this is what's going on. Is this what you're calling about? What's your question? Ask the question. Yeah, unfortunately, you're going to have to come on site. We can't do that over the phone or remotely. I have to. All right, so I scheduled online, got reminders a week out, 3 days out. The morning of my appointment, I got a reminder that says, when you get on site, click this link. I got on site, I walked across the door, I clicked the link. You're the fourth person in line. Barely sat down. Mr. Albertson, come up to desk 6. Awesome, went up, got my issue taken care of. They already knew I was coming. Seamlessly, they had architected that journey across all this technology, across the knowledge they gained throughout this journey, this journey that I was taking, made it seamless. I have had some of my worst experiences with companies that win awards for great customer experience. But this absolutely phenomenal experience was with my local Department of Motor Vehicles, government agency similar to what you have in Canada that does your driver's license and your car registration. It's where experience has gone to die for generations, seems like. Horrible. But they had figured it out. They had connected it. They had made the effort, in this case during COVID, to fix it. But then I moved. I moved from Colorado to Missouri. I had to take paper in, signed to Missouri. So not everybody's figured it out. But we have this opportunity to understand why things still are so hard for us when we have this opportunity. And partly, I believe, it's because we get kind of frozen in the choices we have to make. So if I can help you with that, if I can share any wisdom that will help your organization, I am happy to do that. But I really want to thank you for being here and listening today to all the speakers, but also specifically to me. Thank you. As promised, we are at drinks. So if you want, right next door, we got drinks, music. They were already testing the music a little while ago. We heard it through the wall. So I will see you over there. Enjoy the rest of the day today.